1962. Tensions are at an all-time high. I'm not talking about politics, I'm talking about the football field. Picture this, 100,000 spectators in Jakarta. Almost all of them booing, hissing and jeering against one team. And one team alone, India. But the Indian players? Unfazed. They stand tall, ready to defy all odds. Today, we're going back to that fateful day when India faced South Korea in the final of the Asian Games. You know the name Chudi Goswami. Maybe you remember the story of our captain from an earlier episode. Yes? This was his crowning jewel. Maybe you'll also know P.K. Banerjee and Jarnail Singh. This is a story of their grit, blood and glory. A story that gets under your skin and stays with you forever. And oh, there's a little twist that will surprise you. A certain team you'd never expect was cheering for India in the stands. Curious? For that, you'll have to wait to know who it was. Welcome back to A Century of Stories India, brought to you by IDFC FIRST Bank. Always you first. I'm your host Kunal, and today we're looking back at one of Indian football's most legendary moments, the 1962 Asian Games gold. Indian football reached its zenith in the 1950s. Under the watchful eye of coach Syed Abdul Rahim, India had already won gold at the 1951 Asian Games. In 1956, we made it to the semi-finals of the Olympics, a feat that turned heads all across Asia. However, as we entered into the late 50s, the team suffered setbacks. In 1958 Asian Games and then again in the 1960 Olympic Games, despite a spirited draw against France, we failed to qualify beyond the first round. Even then, expectations remained at an all-time high. The officials in India's football administration grew increasingly impatient and demanded tangible results in major tournaments. Coach Rahim's position was put under intense scrutiny. Thus, by 1962, the pressure was well and truly on the Indian team. But here's the kicker. India almost didn't make it to the Asian Games in Jakarta, and the football team was nearly axed from the contingent. Do you know why? Because the government was short on foreign exchange. Can you believe it? The team that was about to make history was on the verge of being left behind due to budget cuts. But thanks to some last-minute lobbying, the team got the green light. Now, the city of Jakarta wasn't exactly welcoming. The host country had already sparked controversy by refusing visas to athletes from Taiwan and Israel, whom they did not recognize as nations. But India's representative, Gurudutt Sondi, wasn't having it. He spoke up rather infamously, saying, if certain countries were barred, the event shouldn't be called the Asian Games at all. Now, this didn't go down well with Indonesia. The result? The traveling Indian team faced the heat at every turn. An angry mob even stormed the Indian embassy. Tensions were at boiling point. And yet, somehow, against all odds, the Indian team was there, ready to play. Boy, what a script! But navigating their way in Jakarta was only half the battle. The tournament itself was not an easy ride. The Indians found themselves in a tough group with South Korea, Japan, and Thailand. The opening match against South Korea, a nightmare. We lost 2-0. Suddenly the pressure was cranked up a notch. But this Indian team wasn't one to give up. Next up, Thailand. This was when things started to turn around. Chudi Goswami opened the scoring with a beautiful goal, and P.K. Banerjee and Tulsidas Balaram sealed the 4-1 victory. But there was a catch. Jarnail Singh, our star defender, suffered a brutal head injury and had to leave the field. 6 stitches later, everyone was left wondering, would he make it back? Remarkably, barely 20 hours later, the Indian team faced Japan in a must-win encounter. Exhaustion had set in for the Indians, while Japan had the advantage of several days' rest. But this team, digging deep, held on. PK Banerjee and Balaram found the net, giving India a hard-fought 2-0 win. It sent us straight into the semi-final and kept our dream alive. Now this is where coach Rahim Saab's eccentric genius shone. With Jarnail Singh still recovering, Rahim did something bold. He moved Jarnail to the front as a striker. What? A defender, bandaged and injured, playing up front? It sounded crazy, but it worked. Jarnail scored a key goal and India beat South Vietnam 3-2 to advance to the final. It was pure grit and heart that got us there. And now the final. The stands were packed. Over 100,000 spectators, and most of them were rooting for our opponents, South Korea. But Rahim Saab, he had a plan. Despite battling cancer at the time, he made one of the gutsiest decisions in Indian football history. Jarnail Singh, our ironclad defender, will again play as a forward. The game kicked off, and 17 minutes in, PK Banerjee found the back of the net. 1-0 to India. The crowd fell silent. There was a hush around the stadium. Then, just minutes later, Jarnail Singh, bandages and all, powered through the Korean defense to score another 2-0. The tension in the air was electric, but the mighty South Koreans weren't done yet. Late in the game, they pulled one back, making it 2-1. The crowd roared to life. They smelled blood. The pressure was on, but India's defense held tight. Those last few minutes felt like eternity. And then, the final whistle. India had won the gold. 2-1. Victory was ours. Indian football had reached its promised land. This wasn't just a victory. It was a statement. A story of resilience, of standing tall in the face of adversity. Syed Abdul Rahim, the mastermind. Jarnail Singh, the warrior. Chuni Goswami, the leader. These were men who became legends on that day. 9 months after that glorious day, Rahim Saab sadly passed away, succumbing to cancer. But his legacy is etched into the history of Indian football. The 1962 triumph remains our greatest football achievement, a shining example of what is possible when grit meets strategy. And as for that surprising supporter in the stand who was cheering, you remember? Well, it was none other than the Pakistani hockey team who barely a day earlier had defeated the Indian team in their final. Rivals in one match, cheering allies in the next. That's the beauty of sport, isn't it? And speaking of history, in our next episode, we'll dive into another moment that changed everything. Curious? Well, for that, tune in next time to The Century of Stories India, brought to you by IDFC FIRST Bank, always you first. Before you go away, we bring you safe banking tips from IDFC FIRST Bank. Now, did you know scammers can now use AI technology to create fake content using publicly available information? Not only that, they can even make personal calls and requests. So, if you receive a video call from friends or family with an odd request, look out for inconsistencies in their behavior. Cut the call and call them back from your phone. Be vigilant to avoid scams and financial loss.